Hello everyone, and welcome to the brand new 2023 How to Make a Five Nights at Freddy's game in Scratch tutorial. This series is going to be split up into 6 parts, and in this first part we are going to be covering the menu screen, including the static overlay, the glitching character, the play button and continue button, the fades, and a night screen display. Before we start, if you want to know how to make your Scratch look like this, look like mine, have cool stuff like this, because this is kind of what you're going to be seeing, in the link in the description below, I show a video of how to customize your Scratch to look just like this. Without further ado, let's get started. The first thing that we're going to want to do is obviously set up our menu screen. So what I like to do is come into our backdrops tab and choose an overall background color. I find that a very dark gray works well for me. Usually I set the color to 0, 0, and 10. We can just cover up this whole backdrop just like this. Gives us this nice dark gray without quite being black, because black never really looks good in the long run. You want to try to avoid perfect black and perfect white whenever you're designing a game. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to add our text to this screen. So select your text icon and set your color to whatever you'd like. Again, I'm not going to use perfect white. I'm actually going to set it to 0090 to give me a slightly gray tint on that white. Now, I'm going to rename this backdrop costume menu screen. You can head back to your coding menu and don't forget to save your project. What we're going to do is we are going to add our character to the screen. You can design your character however you want. I'm just going to design mine as the original ugly model, not original, a little bit upgraded, that we used so long ago. Here he is. So what I'm actually going to do is we're going to call this sprite title screen ugly. We can actually go ahead and center him in here, and then we can drag him wherever we'd like on the screen. I'm going to choose right here. It's very important you drag him to wherever you want on the screen, because we're going to use that for an easy way to decide the X and Y values later on. We're going to duplicate this costume, or you can make an entirely new one, because we need to set the times when he will glitch out of place. I've quickly ran through and made 3 more costumes. I rushed this together for the sake of the tutorial. Obviously, I want you to spend way more time on your designs. We have our normal variation, which I'm going to call this costume normal. And then we have our 3 glitch variations. So I'm going to call it glitch 1, glitch 2, and glitch 3. You don't have to make 3. You can actually make as many as you'd like. What we're going to do is right off the bat, we are going to go to our backdrops tab and pull out a when green flag is clicked. Underneath this when green flag clicked, we're actually going to come under events and grab a broadcast and make a new broadcast and name it menu screen. I'm going to capitalize it and put a dash before it, because that will make it very easy to find, because this is going to be a very common broadcast that we come back to quite a bit. The reason we're doing this is because you never usually want to call your green flag, because you can't call green flag in the game. Like, you can't grab a broadcast and broadcast a green flag. So we're going to avoid using this when green flag click as much as possible. In fact, we're only going to use it about 1 time. Head back to your character sprite, and we're going to do when I receive menu screen, because again, we are acting like this is our green flag. When I receive menu screen, we obviously want to select his location. You see, I had you place him where you wanted him, because right off the bat, when you pull out a go to X and Y block, it'll automatically choose the X and Y's that they're already at. So if you place them where you want on the screen, you don't even have to mess with these numbers. We are obviously going to want to set the beginning costume, and we want our first costume to just be normal. Of course, we also want the sprite to show. So let's drag out a show so that our sprite can show. Now what we need to do is set up our glitching effect. We're going to come to control and pull out a repeat until empty block. You can use repeat until empty loops the same way that forever loops work. These 2 blocks are actually the same thing, as long as you don't put anything inside of this repeat until up in this block. The only difference between the 2 is that a repeat until is actually easier on your computer to run than a forever loop is. Put a repeat until down, and then inside of this, we are going to grab a wait block. Go to your operators and pull out a pick random and slap that in there. And now we're going to decide our intervals for how often he's going to glitch. I'm going to set it to 5 to 8 seconds. However, you could be specific and do 5.00 and 8.00 to get very specific decimals to make it feel that much more sporadic and different. Every 5 to 8 seconds, he's going to glitch. So how do we actually set up a glitch? Let's head to control and grab a normal repeat and put that right underneath. Inside of this repeat, we're going to choose how many times he's supposed to glitch. If you don't know an exact number, you can actually just duplicate this pick random, put it in there, and say, let's want him to glitch 4 to 9 times. Inside of this, what you're going to do is go to your looks tab, pull out a switch costume 2, and now, instead of choosing which glitches yourself, you can duplicate your pick random, put it in there, and switch to costumes 2 to however many costumes you have. In my case, is 4. We do this, and then we go to our control tab, grab a weight, put it underneath, and put another pick random in there, and let's say 0.02 to 0.05. This is going to determine how long it stays on this costume. I want it to glitch really quickly. The higher the number you make these, the slower he will glitch between his costumes. And then after it's done doing that, make sure under your normal repeat block that you put another switch to costume, switch it back to normal so that it switches back to his normal sprite. Great. Let's save and take a look. Look at that. There's his glitch, and he's going to do this forever because that repeat until when you leave it empty will actually run forever. It's just easier on your computer. We set up our glitching character. That's actually all there is to it. Let's move on to the next piece of this tutorial, which is going to be our play button. Let's make a new sprite. What I like to do is come to our backdrop, grab our fill, and eyedrop the background of our menu screen. Come back to your play button sprite and make a rectangle with that color. Make sure it doesn't have an outline. Let's zoom in, grab our text option, and I'm going to set this to 0090 because again, using a white is usually never a good idea. Only time I use a perfect black is when it's for an outline of a character. So let's type in new game. We are going to have a costume in which the mouse is not touching it and another costume where the mouse is touching it. So I'm going to call this costume no mouse. I'm going to duplicate this costume and we are going to call this mouse. Right next to this, I'm going to take a text and we are going to switch the font to pixel, and I'm going to put a lowercase x again in that 0090 color, and I'm going to drag this right next to the new game. I'm going to line it up with the new game words. So it sits right next to it just like that. Therefore, when our mouse is touching it, it's going to switch to this sprite. Let's move into that now. First of all, let's name our new game button new game button. Under events, we're going to grab when I receive menu screen. Inside of this, what we're going to do is obviously decide where it goes. So you can drag your new game sprite wherever you want. I'm going to choose right here. Let's have it go there. We drag out a go to X and Y, which again should be the identical, but if it's not, make sure you're just checking these down here to make sure they're equal to the things in the blocks. Let's have it switched to no mouse. Let's obviously have the button show. Now let's set up the ability for it to sense if our mouse is touching it. Come to control and grab that repeat until. Inside of this repeat until, we are going to grab an if-else statement and put it inside. Come to sensing and grab touching mouse pointer. Inside this if-then statement, what you're going to do is make it say switch to costume mouse. Inside the else statement, you can duplicate the switch costume to block and set it to no mouse. So if it's touching the mouse, we switch the costume to mouse. If it's not touching the mouse, we switch it to not touching mouse. Let's take a look and see if that works. All right, it's in the right spot. Let's touch our mouse to the new game button. Look at that. It works perfectly. In our if-then touching mouse pointer, if, come to sensing, mouse down. If it's touching the mouse pointer, it'll sense if the mouse is down. If it is, we want it to start the night. Is we're going to make a broadcast in here, and I'm going to call it fade. Let's head to our list tab and make a new list, and we are going to call this background info. This list is going to keep track of a whole bunch of things that run in the background that the player never really sees. Let's head to our backdrop to set it up. Whenever we have a list like this is when I'll use the green flag again, because if we're running things under the menu screen, whenever you come to the menu, it's going to reset your whole list. We don't want that to happen. Underneath the when green flag is clicked, we're going to come to our lists tab and we are going to say delete all of background info. Go ahead and right click your green flag clicked and hit add a comment. That'll make this little box over here. This is really nice for keeping track of things that are going on in your game so that if you come back after a break, you remember what's happening. So I'm going to mark this background info, just so I know what it's talking about. The first channel in the list is going to keep track of the fade reason. I'll explain that in a minute. Just trust me for now. Come to our control, add a repeat, and inside of this repeat, we're going to put add 0 to background info. Since right now we only have one thing that I'm going to be putting into background info, I'm going to set this repeat to 1. That's all you need to do for now. If I show the background info list and we hit the green flag, you'll see it adds a 0 into channel 1. Let's get back to programming our new game button. Inside of the new game button, we're going to broadcast fade. However, before that, we need to set our fade reason. Why are we fading? So what we're going to do is in our list tab, we're going to grab a replace item 1, and we're going to put that above the broadcast fade. This is because we need to set the reason for the fade before we actually fade. So we know that item 1 of our background info, since we labeled it here, is the fade reason. So we're going to replace fade reason with 1, as we'll make another comment next to this fade reasons. The first fade reason would be a new game. We have these two pieces of information here. Head back to your new game button. We need to replace item 1 of background info with something. That just means replacing our fade reason and then describing why the fade reason is. So we know that our first fade reason is because of a new game, which is equal to 1. Come to our new game and set it to 1. Now it's saying that our fade reason is new game. And then we'll broadcast fade. Let's make a new sprite for the actual fade. I'm going to use the same dark gray that I used for the background. I'm going to call this sprite fade. I'm also going to call the costume normal fade. Let's start programming in our fade. When the menu screen is clicked, the fade shouldn't even be here. So what we'll have it do is come to control and say stop other scripts in this sprite. Come to looks and add a hide. Really what that does is it just stops bugs in the future from even being able to happen. When we receive the broadcast fade, how do we actually make the fade fade? What we're going to want it to do is go to 0, 0 so that it's centered on our screen. Then we'll come to looks and grab set color effect, switch color to ghost, and set the ghost effect to 100. Ghost effect 100 is basically the exact same thing as using a hide block, except you can change how much it's hidden. Think of it like an opacity slider to be able to make the sprite see-through. So we set the ghost effect to 100. Then, and only then, once it's hidden, can we show it. Now this, if you run this, you won't be even able to see the fade, and that's exactly what we want. Now underneath this, we can come to control and grab a repeat loop and put it underneath. Let's set it to 20 because we need to be able to equal 100, and this will make sense in a second. I'm going to set it to 20, and then we're going to go to looks and grab a change color effect, not a set, a change ghost effect by -5. The reason I'm doing 5 here is because we have 20 in the loop. 20 times 5 equals 100. If you did repeat 10, you'd want to do -10, because 10 times 10 is 100. I'm doing repeat 20 since the fade will happen slower. The lower the number of repeats, the faster it will fade. But I want it to be a fairly slow fade. The reason we're doing a negative instead of a positive is because the ghost effect is already a positive number, so we need to decrease the number to make the fade start to show. You don't need to do this. I like to do it just to make sure nothing goes wrong. Underneath, we're going to set the ghost effect to 0. So let's take a look. When we hit new game, it fades in like that. But now it doesn't fade out. So let's set up a fade out. All you need to do is come to control, and let's say we grab our wait. How long do we want the fade to be on the screen before it starts to fade out? I think 1.5 seconds is plenty. I'm just going to right click the repeat loop and hit duplicate. It's going to duplicate everything we made. I'm going to put it underneath, and instead of changing the ghost effect by -5, I want the fade to become invisible, so we're going to do positive so that the ghost effect climbs up, and then set ghost effect to 100, get rid of the weight 1.5, come to looks, and hit hide. This is what our fade should look like now. Let's take a look at what happens now. When we hit new game, the fade shows up, stays for a bit, and fades away. Why did I have us set up a fade reason? This is for afterwards. I'm going to make use of a custom block here. This may look confusing, but I'm going to explain it as best as I can. Come to your My Blocks and make a new block. Make the name of the block fade reason, just for the sake of easily understanding what it's for. We're going to tick this one without screen refresh so that it runs a lot faster. We're gonna hit OK. Drag your fade reason block right above the wait 1.5 seconds block. When making that new block, you get this giant define block. Fade reason. We need to check why we're fading. Let's come to control and grab an if else. If, come to operators and grab equal, we're gonna put 1 at the back. Go to our lists and grab item number of. So if item 1 of background info, which again is fade reason, if our fade reason equals 1, or new game, then we need to broadcast the new game. So we want it to show our newspaper. Let's come to events and make a new broadcast. We are going to call this broadcast newspaper. And that's all we need to do. Now let's actually make our newspaper. Make a new sprite. I'm going to quickly throw this together. All right, I just finished my newspaper art. I'm going to call this sprite newspaper. Again, I recommend you spend much more time on this than I do. I'm doing it lazily just for the sake of this tutorial. Let's head to the code. When I receive menu screen, we are going to stop other scripts in the sprite and hide. Receiving newspaper, we're going to go to 00, show. This shows in the middle of our fade, but it happens after the fade is already completely concealed the screen. Let's take a look. Hit new game. Fade shows up. Oh, but look at that. It goes to the top even though our fade hasn't finished. So in our newspaper, before it shows, we're going to hit go to back layer and put that right in there. Now let's test it. All right, the newspaper shows up. However, our play button and our character are still in the way. Let's fix that. Come to our title screen, character. When we receive newspaper, we are going to go to control, grab stop other scripts in the sprite, and hit hide. Here I can give you a good example of what the stop other scripts in this sprite is gonna do. Stop other scripts in this sprite. This is a script, which will stop this from constantly running, which will make the game run faster. I'm going to grab this piece of code and drag it into our new game button. Put that right underneath. Now let's take a look. Hit new game, it fades. Here's the newspaper. What happens if we constantly click new game? Look at this. If we click new game really fast, we can completely stop the fade and kind of break it. Let's stop that from being able to happen. Inside of new game, we're actually going to make another costume. Let's copy the normal no mouse sprite. We're going to call this no action, meaning when it's on this costume, no actions with it will be able to happen. Right in here when the mouse is down, after fade, switch the costume to no action, and then in control, we're going to grab a stop this script, put it right underneath. Therefore, it'll stop this script, which will stop the repeat until loop. Let's take a look and see if we can keep clicking it now. Click, and as we keep clicking, nothing happens, and it still goes away, just as it should. There we go. We have our newspaper complete. Now, let's add in the static. In order to add in the static, we'll have to download it in the first place. In the link in the description, I have a link to where you can go ahead and download the static. I had a few people who didn't know how to add the static last time, so let me show you how to do it now. Following the link in the description will take you to this page, FNAF Static Download. You're going to just click Download File right here, DK Universe's Static Tutorial Pack. Go ahead and hit download, and it will install. Head back to TurboWarp and open up your file managers, and right here you should see DK Universe's Static Tutorial Pack. If you have WinRAR like I do, you'll see this icon. If you don't, it might be a cone, or it might be just a folder file with a zipper on it. Regardless, it should be a .zip. Right-click that folder and hit extract here. That should give you an open folder. Feel free to delete the original zip file. Let's make a new sprite for static. Make a new sprite and call it static. Now we need to import the costumes. So open up your DK static tutorial pack, double clicking the folder, and you'll see all of these different statics. Grab all of them and drag them right into the costumes. If that doesn't work because you don't have a specific add-on, you can manually, inside of your costumes, hover over the plus and grab an upload costume, where you can then open the static pack and individually add each costume by costume. You have all the static imported. Let's continue. What we need to do is enlarge in this first of all, because as you can see, the static doesn't even cover the whole area. If you set it to 150, it will. That's just setting that size. Inside of static, we're going to come to events and do when I receive menu screen. We obviously want the static to go to 00. We want its size to be set to 150. And the costume doesn't matter what it starts on, so we're not going to set that. We are going to make it go to the front layer, since we want this on top of everything else. We want to set its ghost effect to, let's say, 75. We can tweak that however we want. And then we want it to show. But it's not going to transfer through the costumes. So come to Control, grab a repeat until, and inside just put next costume. Let's take a look at what that looks like. Look at that. You can see the static moving on top of the screen. And since we didn't use a when this sprite clicked sensor, we can still click the new game. Great. If you don't like how see-through it is, the higher the number you make this, the more see-through it'll be. I think 65 works for me, but you can tweak it and do whatever you'd like. There, we have static added. Now, let's work on the night screen. Obviously, in FNAF, when the night screen shows, the static isn't there. So, in the newspaper, we have to decide how long the newspaper even shows up for. Let's have it say, wait, maybe 5 seconds. It'll stay on the newspaper screen, and then it's going to immediately snap cut, no fades, to our night screen. Let's set that up. We actually need to make our night screens. Come to your backdrops. I'm going to Control-C or hit copy on this background, not the text. We're going to make a new backdrop, and I'm going to paste with Control-V, or hitting the paste button, the backdrop on there, so it stays this nice dark gray. I'm going to name this backdrop Night 1. Now I'm going to grab my text and set it to 0090, and we're going to type in Night 1. Let's make that really big. I have a kitty right next to me. Then I'm going to make another line that says 12 a.m. Night 1, 12 a.m. I'm going to duplicate this backdrop and switch Night 1 just to say Night 2, and 7, because there's the secret 6th night, and then there's 7 for custom night. Now, if you want to have more nights, you can do that. If you want to have less nights, you can do that as well. Back to our newspaper. After waiting our 5 seconds or however long you want, we are going to do a broadcast called Night Screen. Right before that, we're going to hide the newspaper. In our static, we need to grab our when I receive, say when I receive Night Screen. We are going to come to Control, stop, other scripts in this sprite, and then hide the static. Let's come to our backdrops now. Pull it up here. We'll do when I receive Night Screen. We're going to do switch backdrop to. How are we going to decide which backdrop to switch it to? Let's make a variable and call the variable night number. What we're going to do is come to operators and grab a join block and put it right in here. Since we named our costumes Night 1, Night 2, Night 3, Night 4, Night 5, Night 6, and Night 7 in this format that's identical besides the number, is we can say in this first part, we can write night, just like the name of our backdrops, and then we can grab the night number variable and put it in the second spot. So let's say our night is set to 2. When we run that, it says Night 2, which is the name of one of our costumes. Switch to backdrop night, whatever number it's on, and that's actually all we need to do. We do have to set up a way for it to decide what night we're really on. Obviously, when we hit new game, we're going to start on Night 1, so we can go ahead and come to our variables, and right above this replace until, we can do set night number to 1. Oh, look at this. When we start the game, the backdrop doesn't go to our title screen. So inside of our backdrop, what we can do is go to events and grab a when I receive menu screen, switch to backdrop menu screen. Let's test it. Everything looks right. When we hit new game, it fades, shows us our newspaper, and after 5 seconds cuts right to the night 1. I think we can make this effect look a bit cooler, and if you're familiar with FNAF, you'll know you see some white lines that show up on the screen. Let's make those. I'm going to call these white static lines. The way to do this is to just simply grab a square. We're going to set this to white. I'm going to do 0090 for a slightly different white, and we just have to design some lines. So here's one. We make another costume for another. You can make quite a few costumes doing this. The more I feel, the better. I just made 10 random additions of 1 to 3 lines on the screen. Now, let's start programming. When I receive menu screen, we will stop other scripts in the sprite and hide the lines. When I receive night screen, we will go to 00, go to front layer, and then we will grab show. Then we'll go to control and grab a repeat block. Let's say it'll choose 5 random things to go through. Repeat 5 times, switch costume to, pick random 1 through 10. This last number will be however many you created. Since I have 10 costumes, it'll be to 10. I don't feel any need for a wait, so let's then afterwards put hide. Let's test what that looks like. There. I think that looks great. We have one more thing to add, and that's our continue button. Let's duplicate our new game button, and we're going to call this the continue button. Since we duplicated it, we have all the scripts from the last one. The only things we have to change is where it shows up. But first, let's design what it looks like. Continue is a bit smaller than new game is, so I'm actually going to condense how big the hitbox is. Our no mouse sprite, our mouse sprite, which again, we just need to add that pixelated X, and then our no action. But you might know about Five Nights at Freddy's games is when you hover over your continue button, it will actually display what night you're going to go to. Let's set up how to do that. So underneath our mouse, we are actually going to say mouse 1, and this 1 is going to determine the night that we're going to. So if we duplicate it to mouse 2, we first need to actually add what night we're going to. Underneath continue, but still inside of our hitbox, I'm going to write night 1. I'm going to put it right underneath the word continue. Going to duplicate mouse 1 and just change night 1 to say night 2. Duplicate it again, set it to 3, and so on and so forth until you reach 5. Since night 6 is always its own button, we only need to make it go up to night 5. Don't forget your no action costume. Now, let's change the code up just a little bit. Inside of here, instead of switching costume to mouse 1, what we're going to do is switch costume to, we're going to use the same thing we did for the night screen, and switch it to join mouse, and then the night number. Mouse, because that's just how we have it named. Mouse 1, mouse 2, 3, 4. But now you might realize we don't actually set the night on the first go until we click new game. Inside of our backdrops here, under the green flag, to set the night to 1. Again, we're putting it under green flag since this only occurs 1 time. Head back to your continue button, and everything should be set as it is. You actually are going to get rid of this set number block because we're not going to need it. This fade reason stays the same, fade stays the same, no action stays the same. We have to give it a new fade reason, which actually, upon clicking a new game, since there's no newspaper to go to if you are on night 2, we can actually get rid of the fade reason and switch the broadcast straight to night screen. In newspaper, we're going to keep that the same. We're going to duplicate this and put night screen at the same time, since we don't actually have time to hide it somewhere else, and we can't put a hide underneath the stop this script. Perfect. Now we actually have to figure out where it goes though. Let's move this continue down. And what I like to do to make sure that these hitboxes aren't touching is temporarily switch their colors. We can see that they're not touching. I can line them up. When I'm done, I can change the color back to what it was. Don't forget in your continue button to actually swap out where they should go. You can check down here. Great. Let's take a look. Here we are. We hover over new game. We hover over continue. It says we're going to night 1. When we click on continue, broadcast night 1, but our new game and our character stay there. Let's fix that. Go to your character and duplicate his newspaper sprite and just change it to night screen. You can then drag this right into new game and it'll already be inside of it. Let's try it one more time. When we hit continue, boom, our night screen shows up. When we hit new game, our continue button does stay there if you notice, which would break it for us if we hit both really fast. Let's fix that real quick. Coming down to continue, when we receive, let's duplicate this and say fade. All we need to have it do is switch its costume to no action and add a stop other scripts in the sprite. Now let's see if we can break it. No, we cannot. But you realize how long continue stays there for? The reason for that is because continue is actually at a higher layer. So if we set the continue button to go to the back layer up here, we can see that immediately makes a very small difference. A difference being solving the problem. Great. That's all I have to show you in this tutorial. Thank you all so much for watching. If you found it helpful, please like the video, and tell me what you'd like to see for this series in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.